But there were millions of people who were coming up then. Buddy Holly was completely different. He was more out of Nashville. So that sort of introduced us to the whole country thing. Via him, you started to hear records that, oh yeah, that's a bit like Buddy's way of singing. You know, I still love Buddy's vocal style a lot, and his writing. That was the great thing about him. Searching by the Coasters, and then when Elvis came on the scene, you know, we just saw him in a photograph actually. And he just looked so great. My dad bought me a trumpet from Rushworth and Draper's, who were the other music store in town. And I loved it, but then I realized that I wasn't going to be able to sing with this thing stuck in my mouth. So, and I wanted to sing along with it. So I traded it in for a guitar, which was a Zenith. I flogged the trumpet. So the first great one really was The Girl Can't Help It. Right. That I think that is the great music film. Because they'd always treated music films as B pictures and used it just as a theme tune like Blackboard Jungle, or they'd been little black and white things strung loosely together with an Alan Freed or someone who's the personality, and then lots of what they thought were kind of B black acts generally, and a few white acts, mainly black acts. But to us it was Clyde McPhatter. My God, Fats Domino, you know, we idolised these people. But they were always given a very crummy treatment, we thought. Until Girl Can't Help It, which famous moment at the beginning of that, Tom Ewell takes the screen and he says, wait a minute, you know, and he pushes the screen out.
Pardon me.
And then he goes, and it becomes colour.
As I was saying, this motion picture was photographed in the grandeur of CinemaScope and in gorgeous, lifelike color by Deluxe. Gorgeous, lifelike color by Deluxe. Sometimes you wonder who's minding the store.
And then Jane Mansfield comes on and the game's over, you know.
She walks by, the men folks getting rolled. She can't help it, the girl can't help it.
To school with Paul, you know, to grammar school. And we were both in the same class in the first year. And then we went off into different streams, you know. But I knew him since I was about 11. George, we used to smoke behind the air raid shelter in the playground. He was in the same school, but a year younger.
George, he was a bus stop away, which was like very important, you know. And I'd get on my bus, and then George would get on the stop after. So being near each other in age, we'd kind of talk to each other. Although I tended to talk down to him. And I think it was probably a failing all the way through, just because he was that year younger. It's very hard to shake that thing. If you've known a guy when he's, 13 and you're 14 and a half or whatever it was, whatever the difference was.
Paul met me the first day I did Bebopaloola live on stage, and a mutual friend brought him to see my group called the Quarrymen.
Me and Ivan were mates. So he said one day, he said, oh, the Woolton Village Fete is on Saturday. And he lived in Woolton near John. He said, do you want to come? You know, I said, yeah, nothing, I'm not doing anything. I think I was about 14 and a half, 15. So I went up there trying to look sharp, you know, and I remember coming into the fete, and there was a bit of a band playing on a platform over there somewhere. You could see sort of a little bit of a band and a small audience in front of them. And there was this guy up there with kind of curly, blondish hair in a checked shirt, looking pretty good for the time, quite fashionable kind of thing, singing a song that I loved, which is the Del Vikings' Come Go With Me. But he obviously didn't know the words. But it didn't matter, because none of us knew the words anyway, so he could bluff it. So he's singing, come down, dum-be-dum-be-dum, dum-dum-dum-dum, lovely little refrain. Then it goes, come little darling, come and go with me, I love you, darling. But John was sort of, come and go with me, down, down, down to the penitentiary. He was pulling blues words, you know, and he's pulling all of this, and so where he didn't know the lyrics, he'd just fill in with blues things. But I noticed this and thought, that's clever, you know, and he's singing good.
George came through Paul.
George's big thing was he could play a thing called raunchy, It was by Bill Justice, and it went down, 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 on guitar, on the A string, and it was good. It really sounded, when you played it, it sounded like the record, you know. I remember we were on the top deck of a bus once, and I'd invited George along, and it was like, go on, George, get it. So he sort of got his guitar out on the top deck. It was an empty bus, you know, going back late night somewhere. And he got his guitar out, and sure enough, he could play it. And everyone was, well, you're in. That's it.
They had all these other people who didn't seem to be doing anything, so somehow we managed to get rid of them. So there was only really left was just John, Paul and I.
We used to show up for gigs with just 3 guitars, and the person booking us would say, where's the drums then? And to cover this eventuality, we say, the rhythm's in the guitars. Sit there and smile a lot and bluff it out, you know, and go, oh, there was not a lot you could say to that, you know. Rhythm's in the guitars. And then we just really try and make them very rhythmic to prove our point.
That will be the day when you make me cry. That will be the day when you say goodbye.
Manchester, the Ardwick Empire in Manchester, where, and I remember going on the train from Liverpool and rehearsing what we were going to do. And John didn't have a guitar for some reason. He probably sold it or busted it or something, I don't know. But George and I had ours. So John thought, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll put an arm around each of you.
And Paul and I, with our guitars, one this way, one that way, doing the backup voices. That was Johnny and the Moondogs.
And we did Think It Over. Think it over, you. Me and George, only in the same key. And then we did Rave On. And I think some other person on that bill was relieved of a guitar that day, I do believe. Stuart was John's friend, mainly, from art college. Stuart was a very good painter. We were all slightly jealous of John's friendship. John being a little bit older, certainly than me, certainly than George. He was a little bit, you know, you wanted to sit next to him on a bus and stuff, like he's the older fellow, you know, it's just the way it was. Now, so when Stuart came in, it was a little bit of he was sort of taking a little bit of that position away from us. We sort of had to take a little bit of a back seat.
Later, Stuart's, the famous stories where he sold his painting to John Moore exhibition or something like that.
So the question was, what do you do with 75 quid? So we all reminded him over a coffee that was just about what Hofner basses cost. Funny you should win that amount, Stu. It's very, very, you know, very near the cost. And he'd say, no, I can't, you know, it's 75 quid, because it was a fortune in those. It was like an inheritance. He'd say, I can't, you know. It's painting, I want it for, I've got to paint by canvases or something. He'd say, Stu, see reason, love. Hofner, big, bass, group, fame. He said, all right then. So he bought a big Hofner that kind of dwarfed him, really, because he wasn't that big. There was this massive big Hofner. Now, the trouble was he could not play.
You know, I missed you. Ever since the club split up, I missed you. We all missed you. Did you miss them? Yeah. Sure. The Beatles missed you. All the Beatles missed you.
And also, having seen Wild Ones recently, I realised that all the guys in it were called Beatles.
And you know that can't be bad.
So we'll leave that one. We'll give it 50-50 to Sutcliffe Lennon.
So there was this audition with Alan Williams, who was the little local manager, and little in height, actually. He was a little Welshman, Alan. He had a little high voice, you know, he was a great little fella, sort of little Liverpool Welsh fella. And he was a smashing little bloke, a great motivator, Alan, you know. We liked him a lot. We used to take the mickey out of him, you know. Anyway, he held these auditions in conjunction with Larry Parnes, whatever, and we were one of the bands. And now the big problem was Stuart not being able to play for this. So we had to tell Stu to turn the other way, do a Moody, just do a big Elvis pose, and turn the other way. In case anyone was taking photos, they'd see we were all in A, and Stuart wasn't. You know, he'd be like, he'd be somewhere else. So Stuart had to do that whenever they were taking photos. But he soon caught up, you know, and we passed that audition. And we went with not a furious name, we went with a guy called Johnny Gentle.
Gentle was very nice, and he had, you know, like the suit that made him look like the pop star. It's funny, because nobody really, in those days, all you had to do is work for Larry Pons, and then they'd just print up those pictures of you and put you on a tour, and it was like as if they were supposed to be famous.
But he said, well, what's your name then? And John was the lead singer for this audition. And at that time he pretty much was. He said, John Lennon. He said, okay, well you can be Long John Silver, and it can be and the Silver Beatles. Long John and the Silver Beatles. Great. We all went, yeah, great. Well, you know, we'd do anything for the job. So that's where we became Long John and the Silver Beatles. Then, of course, because we were really now truly professional, we now could do what we've been toying with for a long time, which was changing the name. John was Long John. People have since said, oh, John didn't change his name, he was very suave. Let me tell you, he was Long John. No, none of this, he didn't change his name. I mean, we all went off this idea after that tour and all reverted back to type, you know, and became, we thought, no, we can't have funny names. £15 a week. Now, £15 a week was more than what my dad earned. This is what I was going to be expecting to earn as a teacher. And my teachers in school didn't earn much more than that, you know, so £15 was like a true offer. Mm-hmm. It was like you suddenly had found a profession. Kids let off the leash, is really what it was. And, you know, if you get a girlfriend, she was likely to be a stripper. And if you've hardly ever had sex in your life before, this was fairly formidable. You know, somebody who obviously knew something about it, and you didn't. It wasn't just the little girls you'd been going with. This was like hardcore striptease artists, you know, and so it was like, well, hey, it was quite something, quite an eye-opener. Remember, Ringo used to come in very late at night. He liked the sort of blues sessions when there was not many people there. And I can see what he liked too, and we'd be getting down by then, and we'd be pulling out all the B-sides. We used to do a thing called 3:30 Blues, which is just dun, 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 dun. They all liked the rock and roll, hey, you know, they liked the sort of quick back hairdos and stuff. But they were different, they kind of would all wear black. It was actually a lot of where we got our look from. And they called themselves Exes, existentialists. They were a little, you know, not rockers, not mods, but Exes. While we were out there, we started to see other groups and stuff and started to get a little bit dissatisfied with Pete. Not massively, but just a little bit of dissatisfaction started to creep in. He got to know this stripper, and he and she were like boyfriend and girlfriend. Of course, she didn't finish work till about 4 a.m, and he'd stay up till she finished work, and then he'd start his evening. So he'd roll back to us at about, you know, 10 a.m. or something, and he'd be going to bed when we'd be getting up. So I think that had something to do with a little bit of a sort of rift creeping in.
Pete kept being sick and not showing up for the gig.
And then what happened was we really started to think we needed the great drummer in Liverpool. And the great drummer in our eyes was this guy called Ringo Starr, and who had a beard and was grown up and was known to have a Zephyr Zodiac. Mm-hmm. Nobody had this. It was knockoff, probably. Mm. It was, you know, it fell off the back of a showroom. But yeah. It was later put around that sort of, you know, I'd sort of betrayed our leather image. But as I recall it, he didn't have to actually drag anyone to the tailors. You know, everyone went quite happily. Came and we gave a not very powerful audition where he wasn't pleased with our drummer. He didn't like Ringo. Horror of all horrors. Ringo wasn't very good on time at that point. Actually, Ringo's now rock steady on time. It was always his greatest attribute. That's why we wanted him. But to George, he was not as pinpoint as a session guy would be. So Ringo got blown off the first record.
Oh, I was devastated. No, I was devastated. I came down ready to roll, and
George said, have you got anything? We said, well, yeah, we've got one we wrote ourselves. So how'd it go? John went, last night I said these words to my girl. Chum, 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 chum. We're all doing that in the background, all looking serious. And then, come on, chum, chum, come on, please, please me. It's Roy Orbison, yeah. We needed the great drummer in Liverpool. What I was always grateful for was we had a nice staircase to climb. There was never an overnight success, the Beatles. we'd started in pubs, we'd gone on to talent contests, we'd gone on to working man's clubs, we'd gone on to Hamburg clubs. We then started to play town halls and clubs. Then it started to get to be ballrooms. That was the big, because they were big and they held a lot of people. You weren't playing to now 500 or 1,000. It could be like 2,000 people in a ballroom. So if you did good there, the word really got round. Then the next step up from that was theatres. And Brian took us through all these steps. We then were playing like the Empire, Peterborough. And very low on the bill, to Frank Ifield, in fact. Like From Me to You would be on the tour bus. And at the back of the bus, you'd have Roy Orbison writing, Pretty Woman. It's quite exciting, you know. And he'd be writing. And again, the competitiveness would be coming out. Nice, though. He'd play us his. He'd go, oh, it's great, Roy. You've just written that. Then we'd think, God, we've got to have one as good as that. So it was lovely, you know, this kind of staircase was always there. It always felt great. Well, the next move's obvious. Write one like that. So we wrote From Me to You. I remember being very pleased with the middle eight, because there was a sort of strange chord in it. And I got arms along, it sort of goes to a minor, and we thought that was very big step. She Loves You, we had this, I think this idea, it was very, very much a pop idea of she, you know, reported, what do you call it, reported conversation. You know, well, I saw her yesterday, she says, yeah, no, and she told me what to say. This was the sort of thing that got us interested in this, that she said, she loves you, that we were merely the messenger in this song. It was quite a neat little idea. And you also weren't being soppy. Said, I love you, yeah. It was she loves you. It's nothing to do with me, mate. You know, you don't scream at us, because we don't want that.
Well, she loves you. She loves you, yeah.
We said to Brian Epstein, we're not going to America till we've got #1. So From Me to You was released there, flop. She Loves You, big hit in England, #1 in England, flop. Please Please Me released over there, flop. Nothing.